Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge.
It's okay.
Welcome to the Flowerlounge Podcast and our special Moonshine episode with Kristina Wingeier, our intuitive astrologer. We are going to be talking about the month of June 2019. We have arrived.
Yes, we're here. It's June. We start off pretty early with the new moon on Monday. Do you want me to kind of go backward over some big themes before I jump into the new moon? Like, how do you want to do this?
I would love this.
Today.
We love
big themes. Well, the things I have written down are that, we begin the month in the new moon energy, which is a fresh start. And it's the beginning of June. It's a fresh start. It's a new moon. But it's also in Gemini. And there are a couple planetary changes in the first week. So things are starting to change. We're feeling that what has been is really transitioning into what is coming. Gemini season is it's a mutable sign, so it takes us from one thing to another. It's a transition. So June itself feels like a transition month in that way. There is some mid-month energetic tension that really happens around the full moon and the solstice. Things start to get intense. We'll speak about that. And by the time we end the month, we are in eclipse season. We're in Mercury's retrograde shadow. And so things are starting to get perhaps a little distorted as it can be when the Mercury retrograde and eclipse season line up together. And that'll be July. So we'll speak about that more. But there really is this kind of new and then changing, and then we kind of shift gears mid-month and start to there's a lot of pressure that we'll talk about. So I don't know if those are really themes. That's more like their energetic pathway, I'd say, the astro-energetic pathway.
Yeah, let's bring it.
It's a bridge. Feels like a bridge to me. A bridge to cray cray? A bridge to Craytown? Yes. No. Maybe if you're a Cancer or a Capricorn. Actually, if you have cardinal sign, like strong cardinal energy in your chart, buckle up, Buttercup, because the eclipses are activating all that cardinal. Cancer, Capricorn for sure, but then of course Libra and Aries by the square. So astrobabble for your ears. Okay, so Monday, June 3rd, we have a new moon, and the new moon is in Gemini. So the Gemini new moon it's a new beginning. So you're setting up a 6-month trajectory that, where there'll be a reveal on the Gemini full moon in 6 months. But what you're planting seeds around are communication, skillful use of language, listening, a very much forgotten part of communication a lot of times, everybody talking over each other. You know what I mean? Everybody's got something to say and we forget to listen.
Let me tell you about how I feel.
Oh, how do you feel? Wait a minute, Gemini. My sister was a Gemini and and there's that. Like it's Gemini, so potentially distracting and changing the subject and can't quite settle on what the thing is. But you would do really well to examine how you use language, how you communicate. Is it effective? Is it useful? Right? Can you make some changes there? Can you slow down your excess? Because the new moon is definitely in a relationship with Jupiter, as the full moon will be, Jupiter in Sagittarius. So there's this invitation to kind of look at the big picture around all of this and how do you actually apply the knowledge that you have through your communication, right? Like, so there's this knowledge communication, how you do that is it's a fresh start for any of that if you want it to be on this new moon. I think that with the nervous energy of Gemini, that anything that's going to help settle your nervous system is going to be a great thing to get involved with this month in general, just because we do move into eclipse season and whatnot, which thinks it could be a time to share about this beautiful thing, because it helps. I think it's going to be really good for the new moon in Gemini, this elixir you have on board.
Yeah, if you are part of the Flower Revolution program, we'll be taking the desert milkweed. Yeah, I mean, it helps us work with how we feel in our environment. If we feel like we're surrounded by benevolence, or if we feel like, those little subtle paranoias of like, what are they thinking about me? Or is this person angry with me? Or did I say the wrong thing? Or, oh gosh, how did that come off? Or, right? And so, working with the elixir, we'll be able to like really magnify and look at those teeny tiny little subtle influences and really look at where do we feel at home, and making any situation that we're in feel like home, because we're at home in our bodies. We're welcoming ourselves 100% versus feeling like we're in an environment that's like harsh or maybe not welcoming. If you're not in the Flower Revolution program, the best one to work with would be Boundless Wisdom, because of its incredible capacity to help us like have lots of spaciousness so that insights and aha moments can arise. It dissolves any kind of, trauma, also paranoia, freaky feelings in the environment, and really just helps us stay flexible and open and spacious so those like creative aha or wisdom moments can arise.
That's really beautiful. Gemini is very much involved with the nervous system, and being able to still or soothe that so that you can receive the ahas, which is the Sagittarius energy, that Gemini Sag axis, the polarity there. I feel like that's a really beautiful elixir for us for these times, and also just to settle in and smooth the pathways of the eclipse roller coaster, which can get, is involved with Cancer and Capricorn. Cancer is that feeling of home. And so being able to soothe yourself and feel like you can carry home around and have that home base will be very useful preparatory prepping for July's eclipses for sure, and help with the astrology in general.
Yeah, part of what I think that we do with the flower essences too every month is sort of like downloading these earth or flower frequencies, so to speak, or qualities into you, so that you can be better prepared and better equipped, so that it's not so jarring, whatever's coming the next month.
Totally. So if you're spraying Boundless Wisdom, or if you're using the elixir, or both, or whatever, even if you're not, like, definitely this new moon, though, there is a message coming through for a higher pathway than you're used to taking with your language. And this is because Pallas Athena, which is an asteroid, she's in Libra, and she just stationed direct, and she's making a beautiful trine energy to this new moon. And so I feel like she has new strategies for us, for you. This whole time, the last 4 months, she's been reviewing in Libra, and Libra is about justice and truth and balance. And now all that review, she's turned forward and making this trine, this flow between them, in the mind, but with the new moon. And so I feel like there's a beautiful message or way that you can have a new way of communicating, a new pathway, almost like just elevating it to the next level, so that you're not caught up in as much of the drama that you might find yourself getting caught up in, which will, again, be a good thing prepping for eclipse season, to listen for that message. Good stuff. I like it. How do you like it?
I love it. I always love a good message.
It's a good message. And when you think about like any kind of ritual, like I think pranayamas, breath work, and shaking could be really good too if you're feeling a lot of nervous energy, because that helps with your nervous system. What else do you like to do to like soothe your nervous system or bring the airs into balance?
The shaking, bouncing. If your head's going a mile a minute, if you're thinking too much and you're getting too intellectual.
Yeah.
If you feel more still, you might. I'm just listening to the birds in your background.
Like, I know there's a little waterway out here, so there's a lot of birds.
It's like sometimes that act of like listening to nature also helps you listen to yourself.
Oh yeah, totally. There's also bullfrogs at night.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What sound do they make?
I can't do it.
It's like
it's a loud, like, big sound. So when they're all going, like, there's only a few of them right now. Sometimes in the summer, they all get going at night, and it is quite a cacophony or a symphony, depending on your point of view.
That's so cool.
I'm in Oregon right now, which is why I'm in a whole different environment. That's why Katie's noticing new birds and whatnot. So that's our, Monday, June 3rd, new moon in Gemini. Okay. So we've really talked about that a lot. And then the next day is the first sign change this month, and that's Mercury moving into Cancer. So we're going from Mercury being very strong, Mercury being, of course, more about communication and the mind, from being very strong and energized and a little flighty, perhaps, in Gemini, into these deep emotional Cancer, waters of Cancer. So we're looking for more sensitivity around communication. That doesn't mean that you'll necessarily be more sensitive in the way you communicate, but maybe you'll feel more sensitive and take things personally. More reason to take your elixir. But there is that sensitivity and that more inward, deeper, wanting to have deeper, emotionally connected kind of talks with people, or potentially, again, taking things too sensitively. And this is important to pay attention to, this Mercury in Cancer, because Mercury will be meeting up with Mars in Cancer, and Mars is going to get into a little trouble mid-month. So really, as soon as Mercury moves into Cancer, start to pay attention to what you're thinking about and what kinds of conversations you're drawn to, or what kinds of what's your mind doing around any kind of insecurities, emotional insecurities and things like that, and start to track, because you're going to start to get some information that could reveal to you your own personal eclipse journey, right? Start to get some info about that.
So sorry, when exactly does Mercury move into Cancer?
Wednesday, June 4th.
Gotcha.
And that's a pretty big deal. And then there's a second planetary change that week as well. On June 8th, which is Saturday, Venus moves from Taurus into Gemini. So we can stop comfort eating, finally. Venus in Taurus has been a marathon of sugar for many of us. Maybe you can relate out there, sugar and potatoes.
I have had a lot of French fries.
You've had a lot of French fries, right? I'm not even kidding. It's very comfort food oriented. So I feel like in Gemini, of course, Venus is about love and relationships and connection. So she's lightening up. It's an air sign. Taurus is fixed earth. It's heavy. It's to the ground. This is a lighter Venus, more playful, curious, just watch out if you really like to play the stock markets, because perhaps there'll be a lot of volatility. I don't know. I'm not really a financial astrologer, but Venus in Gemini feels like a lot of changes, like, oh, this looks good, but oh, wait, now it's done something else. Who knows? So that's a shift. So we got a new moon and 2 planetary shifts the first week. It's a lot of changes, right? So then, any questions or comments on any of that, my friend?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Week 2, this is where I wrote, the shift starts to get real. And that F is in parentheses, so you know what I'm really saying. I don't know if this is a PG recording, so I'll try to not use...
Not have a big F.
What did you say?
Not have a big F.
Yeah, not have a big F. So this week is when things start to get a little more pressurized. In the lunar cycle, we're going to be working with that first quarter moon, which is always a time of making choices as you move forward in the lunation cycle. So we've got that energy underlying the whole week, okay? And then on Monday, the sun makes an annual opposition to Jupiter. So what this means is it is once a year, kind of, the sun and Jupiter are opposed to each other. It's almost like it's a full moon energy, because the sun and Jupiter are opposite. Jupiter is, of course, a place of expansion, of truth and wisdom. Jupiter is retrograde right now. So as the sun and Jupiter face off in this, what they do once a year in Gemini and Sagittarius, it's accentuating all the things we spoke about at that new moon energy. How do you take the wisdom and communicate and share and translate it, right? How are you doing that right now? Is it useful? Is it effective? A lot of times with Sagittarius and Jupiter, we get this attachment to the truth with a capital T, and everybody else should believe my philosophy. Do you know what I mean? When you get that kind of, what do you call that? Idealism. So really wanting to notice any ideals or ways that you might be holding on to ideas and ideals that are not serving you anymore, right? What I wrote down here is for this week in general, with this Jupiter Sun, super strong gravitational fields, both of them pulling against each other. This is a week to under promise and over deliver. Jupiter exaggerates things. Sagittarius can exaggerate things. So you want to watch out the things that you say you can do this week. You might feel like you can do everything, but you probably can't, because the energy is going to start to get more intense as the week goes. So review, take a look at your, how you're translating and communicating whatever wisdom you have to share. Are you still aligned with those values? And then again, under promise. And then you can do more if you say that you're going to do less. Does that make sense?
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then lots of things happen to Mars this week. So later in the week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're moving toward the full moon. Mars is starting to hit these roadblocks. Mars is in Cancer. So Mars is going to start opposing Saturn, opposing the South Node, opposing Pluto. This is where some of the eclipses are happening. Mars is just really plowing the eclipse field.
Going for it.
Going for it. And so oppositions, basically they're like full moon energy, right? When things are opposing each other, they can see each other very clearly, but they're on opposite sides of the chart or the sky or whatever. So they don't necessarily agree with each other, but they show each other the opposing point of view. So with Mars in Cancer, we've got this emotional, potentially moody situation. Mars is trying to help us move forward, acting from a more intelligent, emotional place. It's not always easy because we're humans and we have a lot of sensitivity and we, a lot of pain and wounding, but we're trying to, with the North Node in Cancer and with Mars coming up at the North Node, to really take action from a place of emotional intelligence. However, we're being faced with past actions, powers that be that may not, want you to move forward in this new way, with restrictions, with Saturn, with things that we can't quite keep our grasp on with that Pluto. These oppositions are dissolving things, which can feel very destabilizing, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is just a week where Mars starts to get into this situation and Mercury joins Mars. So that activates the mind. If you're feeling any insecurities this week as the moon waxes and is getting full, this Mercury Mars opposing all of this stuff could make you more paranoid. But again, with Mars and Mercury on the North Node in Cancer, the stretch is, what's my intuition telling me? What am I, what's my reactivity and how can I slow down and be with my feelings and make an intelligent choice based on emotional connection and move forward from that place? That's the challenge with this Mars. It's not always easy, right? And so that's happening. And then what happens really towards the end of the week, towards Sunday. Sunday is the 16th. The full moon is on Monday. There's I remember we spoke earlier this year about maybe you don't remember, but I spoke earlier this year of a Jupiter-Saturn square that happens 3 times. It happened in January. It's happening again in October. It's kind of this reality versus illusion kind of what's real, what's fake, I want to escape, what's a fantasy. Like that's getting activated this weekend. That's the second square between Jupiter and Saturn. So that's happening too. So we're in the midpoint of that larger conversation between reality and fantasy. And that's happening right before the full moon, right when Mars is in all this hot water. So it's pretty, all tension, I'd say, for week 2. One astrologer that I listen to calls it the meat grinder this month.
Oh my.
which is pretty intense. I'm calling it the pressure cooker just because, I don't know, I feel like that cooking can make a really good stew, can really get the marrow out. And I feel like there's a very transformative opportunity for us should we face it that way instead of being ground to bits, although there's going to probably be plenty of people being ground to bits for all this. So, yeah.
It all makes a good meal, right?
It all makes a good meal. You got to grind the meat. To make a hot dog? No. What do you make from ground meat?
Tenderize us, right?
It's tenderizing us, right? What is that? Is it Rumi or is it Hafiz that if you can't take every little rub, how will you polish into a diamond or something like that? There's a wisdom teaching in this polishing that's happening. Water polishes too, right? It makes stones really, really smooth. And that Cancer energy with Mars and Mercury, it's going to make something very smooth if you can work with it. And really that hone in on that North Node. Look at your chart. Where is this Cancer Capricorn energy? What part of your life is it activating? That's going to help you decode for yourself what's actually going on. It's going to be different for each of us, right? I'm going to bring together two parts of your chart for eclipse hijinks in July. So that's week 2. Any questions or comments? I feel like I'm just going on and on. Katie, you're not talking too much.
That's great. I'm listening.
All right. I'm going to get a drink of water.
So now we're moving on to June, the week of the 16th. 17th.
So Monday is the full moon in Sagittarius. It's the midway point of the lunar cycle. We began on Monday, June 3rd. And the Sagittarius full moon, it's really... A couple of things I'll say about it is you can look back to 6 months ago to the new moon in Sagittarius and kind of consider what seeds you were planting around knowledge, expansion, growth, maybe travel, right? These kind of Sag energies. And there's some kind of reveal or some kind of flowering from that place for you. And with this chart, I'm looking at the chart right now, what I'm noticing is the moon is very close to Jupiter. So in the sky, the full moon will be quite close to Jupiter, which could be cool to look at. But that is really highlighting, again, the kind of the things that we've been talking about with Jupiter around your philosophy of life, your ideals, and are they in line with your truth now? Because you're an evolving creature and you might be changing and you're updating that with the Jupiter retrograde. The full moon right on top of it is really shining such a bright light on that information for you. How are you integrating that and sharing it and transmitting it? That's the sun in Gemini. And in this full moon chart, Venus has stepped into a very close proximity where the new moon actually was seated. So Venus is very much in that place and now picking up another message from Pallas Athena at this full moon. So I feel like Pallas Athena, not a lot of people are going to talk about this because it's an asteroid, but I feel as though she has information in Libra for on both the new and the full moon around this larger conversation of communication and knowledge and application of knowledge and how you share that wealth with others through like language can be a sword, right? A word can be a sword or it can be a flower. How do you handle it? How are you sharing what you know? So that's big full. It's a fire moon. Things will be fiery. Maybe there's some kind of a fire offering or smoke offering, or what do you think you'll be doing on this full moon where will you be? Taiwan?
Yeah.
What do you think you'll do with the fire moon in Taiwan?
I'll be in a hot springs.
Hot. There's the fire in the water. You could write down all the things that you don't believe anymore, or the things you thought you believed, and you could burn the list and liberate yourself from your own belief system. I don't know. Turning yourself a little upside down and trying to burn through some ideas, I feel like could be a pretty useful thing to, in general, just to kind of flip the script sometimes, but just to really clear away ways that you used to think and what you now know, what is now true. There's some kind of knowledge update, I think, happening this full moon.
Agreed. And then I love what you say too with revisiting where you were in January and what you were sort of intending for the year, because that's coming more into fruition, right?
Yeah, totally. I think this will be the end of December. We were talking before the show about the whole summer before the show. We can't reveal July yet, but definitely end of the year, beginning of the year review is coming right now. This full moon and the next full moon, both of them. So it is that time because we're mid-year.
Right.
Right? It's that mid-year review. So
whatever you were like intending as we've switched from the December to January, the new year, just sort of relook at that.
Exactly.
And add some heat to it.
Right. Because maybe you wrote some things down and maybe you look at them now and you're like, oh yeah, this is totally happening. And then one thing you're like, what was I thinking? You know, you can let go of that now. It's good to look back and kind of clear out things because you don't even know sometimes when you energetically commit to something, you kind of forget about it, but it's still running like slows down your system, I feel like. So it's good to get clear and aligned with what you're working on. So I love it. All right. And then the week after this full moon, when I'm looking at it, it feels as though it's a low energy kind of week. Like I just feel like this full moon is going to take, and the week before is going to have put a lot of pressure on our systems, especially the nervous system, as I said, and also the fluid in the body with that Mars in Cancer and Mercury in Cancer. So as we move through the week, what happens is Mercury and Mars finally make their exact conjunction in Cancer on the 2nd. And so that can really bring some pressure to be like, oh my God, I had these insights at the full moon and I really need to tell you about, right? Again, how useful is it? What you say will have long-term effects. Like you really want to think about how you're communicating this week. I think that people might be very touchy this week. As Mars opposes Pluto midweek, I wrote down let go or be buried. So, wow. It's just like, it's a waning moon. Like let go of holding so tightly, right? Let go of needing to know and feel. Trust you got to listen and trust your feelings and your intuitions, and your feelings can lead you into funny places, but you have to feel your feelings. You have to stop trying to control everything. This Cancer Capricorn is a very control-oriented axis. What is she bringing you? You have such a happy face right now. Did you get food?
Oh my gosh, somebody just brought me a coffee drink.
I wish I had. Where's mine? It's okay. What do you have? Let me see.
Looks like a almond milk cappuccino.
Oh. Yummy. Is there an elixir in there?
I'll put one in there.
Okay, you better. I mean, it is, after all, LOTUSWEI. Flower Lounge, we need flowers. So let go or be buried, I wrote. And then Thursday and Friday, this is a very interesting time of the month to me. First of all, Thursday, Mercury enters its retrograde shadow. Mercury is going retrograde in August. So for those of you who are a little more working with the astrology more intensely, I'm going to give you a number. It's 23 degrees Cancer. That is the shadow territory. So when Mercury retrogrades, Mercury will retrograde all the way back to 23 degrees Cancer. So if you're looking at your chart, you're paying attention, you can see where Mercury is going to retrograde if there's anything that will be activated by that retrograde. So this is previewing the retrograde. We're starting to get into the shadow. Things don't go super weird or anything, but you really, again, pay attention to what's coming up for you around all the things I've been talking about this month, the emotional, the mind, all of that. Friday is a very still day. Neptune stations retrograde. This is a 4-month retrograde, a turning inward. It's very subtle, a Neptune retrograde. It's going to highlight inner development on your spirituality and your creativity. So this is a signal from the cosmos to really get your meditation practice on. If you're not, it's going to help you get through eclipse season, your creative practice, right? Turn inward. The sun changes signs. It's solstice, summer solstice. The sun moves into Cancer on Friday. Solstice means stand still, right? It's a peak moment, and it's a still moment, even though it's the peak expansion of our solar year. There's a stillness to it. It actually, I think, doesn't it translate into standstill, solstice? I believe so. The moon all day long is what's known as void of course, which means not making any aspects to any planets, which highlights this kind of ungrounded stillness. Like you might feel like on that solstice, like you're trying to figure out what to do and you can't figure out what to do. You know what I mean? Like you're like, just can't land anywhere or get any traction. Hey, it's Friday. Maybe you could just celebrate Venus Day and slow down and go outside or, do a solstice thing. But the energy is very still. And it's also really, the sun moves into proximity to the North Node, which would officially enter us into eclipse season on that day. So I feel like the solstice is really always important, but quite a powerful marker this month. And an opportunity, again, with that Neptune retrograde to turn inward and slow down, right? It's Venus Day, it's Friday. Listen to the bird song, celebrate the solstice, like whatever that means to you. But it's like you're in a busy environment, but you're calm. You can maintain that, take that with you. It's going to be really helpful.
I love solstice.
Yeah. Do you ever have any solstice rituals or anything? Mm-hmm. Longest day, but it is that point every day after solstice is the turning backward toward darkness. It's the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, shortest day of the year in the Southern Hemisphere. And so in the solar year, we're actually starting to wane after solstice. So solstice is kind of like the full moon of the solar year. So it is a peak moment.
Full moon of the solar year. I love that.
Yeah.
Right, of course. That makes sense.
Right?
It's a great time for us. Like it's a great time to solidify things. It's been amazing.
And then of course the sun is in Cancer. So we're in a whole new solar season. The eclipses will be in Capricorn and Cancer in July. The new and full moon are both eclipses. So we're starting, once the sun moves in, we have had Mars in Cancer. We've had Mercury in Cancer. Once the sun moves into Cancer, that's just, we're officially in Cancer season. And so that part in your chart is really, it's a house cleaning time. The sun moves into Cancer. It happens once a year for you. The weekend, you're really going to want to watch out for overindulgence of all kinds. Venus is going to oppose Jupiter on Sunday, and it's just in a configuration with Jupiter and Neptune that can really invite in some
chocolate cake.
Lots of it. All kinds of things like that. Overindulgence, just coping, because you're going to be coping. Mercury's in the retrograde shadow. We're in eclipse season.
Yeah, So when things like that happen, just as a little side note, do you just kind of like go for it, and then you recognize that that's what's going on, or do you like try to temper yourself? I'm gonna get to Singapore around that date, so like, do I go nuts and eat all my favorite things that I haven't had for a few years, or do I just try to like ease in a little?
Well,
go with the energy, or do you try to temper it?
Well, I guess, it depends on if you want to kind of poison yourself all at once and just get it over with, or if you want to have a little bit of poison every day. I don't know even saying why I'm saying poison, but overindulgence to me signifies that you've pushed the limit into a way that what was sweet or savory or whatever it is now just like it's kicked into like some addiction thing or something. That's what happens for me. And right now it's been Mentos. There's Mentos everywhere around here, and I just keep eating them. And once I open a Mento, like I can't stop eating them. It's so bizarre. Like, what's going on with these Mentos? The mental barrier has been broken. So it's kind of like that. Like, a few Mentos is good, but 35 Mentos later, you're like, what the hell did I just do and why? So maybe you can catch yourself. Maybe you can't. But when you do, you're just kind.
Really enjoy it, whatever you got.
Yeah, I mean, that's when it's an indulgence. But when it's an overindulgence, you're not really enjoying it anymore because you're kind of numbing out, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say that whatever you do, try to bring a lot of compassion to when you notice it's happening, if it happens, instead of, because what you might do is lock into some old, like, oh, you suck. You know how that thing goes when you notice your patterns and you start to be mean to yourself. So maybe you could bring a little more compassion toward that and come from a place of like, well, what could be, what step could I take to get out of this loop or something like that? Or not like, it'll all be different tomorrow, but just something more gentle. That's what I would say. Not always easy. What else happens? The last week in June is a shift again with Mercury. Wednesday, Mercury changes signs, moves into Leo. But Mercury is moving really slowly at this point because the retrograde begins on July 7th, like a week away or so. So Mercury is not going really fast, not going super slow, but it's going into Leo, fully into shadow, territory of the retrograde. Mercury and Leo in general can be a little dramatic. So we're going from that emo communication place to drama. Bellicose, is that a word? Bellicose, just like loud and dramatic and grandiose and passionate, fiery, but slowing down and irritable because about to go retrograde. So there's that. That's happening. Also of note to folks like me, for anyone who's watching Venus in the morning sky or has been watching Venus in the morning sky, Venus is disappearing around this time from the morning sky and will be invisible to us for several months as Venus moves into a very long underworld journey, changing from the morning to the evening sky. So Venus will be very busy, of course, but we won't be able to see Venus for months. This is a big thing for people. I'm really into Venus. And so it's a shifting of energy. Venus in many cultures is connected to Inanna, goes into underworld journeys in order to kind of outgrow and leave something behind. And I feel like eclipse season's a bit of an underworld journey. So Venus, it feels like she's really just going to do it visually. And I think that's important for me. She's going underground. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. Mercury changes sign, Venus disappears, and we're going to have a new moon on July 2nd. It'll be an eclipse, but we're going to get to that next time.
Wow, nice. Eclipse right off the bat for July.
Right off the bat. Ooh. Yeah, these new moons are happening at the very beginning of the month right now. Uh-huh. So the new moon and the new month are getting closer and closer together. In July, we'll have 2 new moons, the last day of the month and the beginning of the month are new moons in the U.S. For you, I think it might shift it because of time zones. But yeah. Okay. Which actually feels pretty, like when I think about those 2 portals of darkness of the new moon going in and going out of July, that's a pretty cool visual and metaphor to contemplate. For me, maybe not you.
I love the birds that are singing in the background.
There's so many birds. It's actually a lake, a little man-made lake out here, and there's a slough, a waterway. And so I've seen ospreys, bald eagle, heron, all kinds of songbirds. There's geese and goslings, ducks and ducklings. It's really like full-on nature experience. It's quite beautiful here in the suburbs of Portland. There's a lot of water up here, waterways in Portland area. It's very earth elements, earth and water feels so feminine to me up here. Where I live, it's very salty and dry, even though it's rains. It's just that salt dryness of the Central Coast. And here it's like
Lush.
every one of my senses is earth and water saturated. It's quite nice.
If anybody isn't following Kristina on Instagram, you should find her, Kristina Wingeier, and her stories are full of the amazing flowers she's seeing. Oh my God, that one day you had like 50 million like
rhododendrons,
and then you had like a big peony party.
Yes,
so
it's so beautiful. And the roses, of course, it's phenomenal here. It's so pretty. And I'm only going more north next, so I'm excited. Yeah.
So just to summarize super quick, maybe just like 3 bullet points or something that we can sort of hold for the month.
It's a time of big changes. Gemini season is shifting energy, moving from one thing into the next. So it does really feel like the bridge to eclipse season this month. And eclipse season happens twice a year, but it does feel a little bit like non-ordinary time to me because eclipses, things can get very tricky. They're very amplified new and full moons. So this month feels like a bridge month to me that really begins to get pressurized mid-month, emotional and mental pressures.
And then for the last thing, what would be our biggest opportunity for this month, even if it's an opportunity to change something?
The biggest opportunity is to let go of the past that is creating the present emotional drama. Because really, I feel like the biggest opportunity is that Mars and Mercury on the North Node in Cancer. The North Node is the stretch, the edge point for all of us as a collective to move into more emotional intelligence and not a place of what happens with Cancer and Capricorn sometimes is a fear of the other and a hiding and a holding, right? And a reactivity and a safety and security. So you keep things out to soften into your heart space, into a deeper emotional self-reliance with yourself, so that you're not playing these kinds of games, these submission, dominance, emotional drama games, right? With people and with your words and with your language and with your mind, that just to soften into emotional self-reliance. That's the North Node in Cancer. And it's going to feel potentially hard to do that. And you might want to put up a lot of barriers. Energetic boundaries are important, though, for sure. I feel like Mars and Cancer can help us get very clear boundaries. Like no is a full sentence. So maybe there's some things you need to say no to. Maybe there's some things you need to say yes to that you usually say no to. But there's something around that. Does that make sense? And is that helpful?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so join us back here on Moonshine July 1st for all the downloads about the eclipse season happening in July and August.
Yes. July will be a month of interesting things, for sure.
Fireworks.
Yes, fireworks. Eclipse season fireworks. Always fun.
Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Podcast Moonshine.
So fun. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.